everyone to rise and join the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
to the flag of the United States
of America,
and
to the
and
republic
to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
justice for all.
liberty and
Liberty
justice
justice
for all.
for all. Okay, thank you. And I think I neglected to do this last time, and I skipped over it this time. We should do the roll call first. Start out with Mayor Thomas is present. Anderson.
Present.
Councilmember Bottom is up north in God's country where there's no internet access as it should be. So he's not able to join us tonight, I guess. Lothar.
Present.
And Schultz.
Here.
Okay. Okay, the agenda approval. Brad, you're going to walk through some.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, just to walk through again for those who are on the phone call here tonight, we have a couple opportunities for folks to provide comment if they wish. The first is open forum for items that are not on the agenda. Then there's public comment opportunities at the planning business, unfinished business, and new business. One item for the agenda tonight, we did not have the information needed to have the closed session tonight, so I would ask that you amend the agenda to remove the closed session.
Okay, would anyone from the council wish to amend the agenda? Or add anything?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Councilman Lothar here. A couple of weeks ago, there was a comment at the council meeting about reviewing the land development rights. And I was just thinking maybe, is there a target date for that review, or maybe we could talk about that and put that on the agenda possibly.
Or reviewing what? I didn't hear.
Land development rights. I think part of that came up with the Carinini development, and there were some questions that came up with that. And there was a request that we would review the, building rights, land development rights, and so forth.
Yeah,
so I don't remember the specifics on that.
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, like this, as Councilmember Lothar said, this is regarding the Carinini development and whether or not there was a need to review the development rights program for combining rights with adjacent properties. And I think the discussion at the time was, yeah, this doesn't feel right. However, it's a tool that's been useful as well. There was no direction for staff to do anything, but if you wanted to add it to the agenda to discuss whether or not to do something about it, you certainly could.
Are you requesting that, Councilmember Lothar?
Yes, I just thought maybe some discussion on clarifying that issue might help prevent some of the things that came up in this most recent development with Carinini.
Okay, I think there were some, I guess, I recall what it was now. I didn't, there was no council or staff action requested on it. It was just a statement that maybe we should look at it. And I guess I had a little different stance on it. So maybe that's why I forgot about it. But I guess we could put that under unfinished business maybe and just.
Either that or under 9C on planning, to keep it within planning, and Kendra's here tonight anyway. It's up to you.
Under what number would you want it?
Oh, sorry, 8C would be the planning item, or 9B.
Okay, no, let's put it under 8C, that's fine. Okay, is there anything else from anyone? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Lothar.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson?
Aye.
Lothar?
Aye.
And Schultz?
Aye.
Thank you. Our commission representatives tonight are Meredith Wu and John Dugan from the Planning Commission and the Parks and Trails. I don't know if they're here or not, or on or not, but if something comes up they want to be recognized, they can let us know. This is the time for open forum, so if there's anyone who wishes to speak at open forum, this will be the time to do it, and Jessica can bring you up if you choose to do so, and she'll explain to you what you have to do that.
Thank you, Mayor. If you're interested in speaking at open forum, you can press *9 if you're on a phone. Otherwise, you can use the raise hand function on the Zoom call there by clicking under participants and using the raise hand function if you're on a computer. It's in the lower right hand corner. Otherwise, if you're on a tablet or other mobile device, it's located under the 3-dot button on your tablet. It does look like at this time we have one individual who has raised their hand. I will go ahead and unmute you at this time. Manoj Thomas, you should be unmuted.
Thank you. Give me, yeah. So
Yes.
loud and clear, right? Perfect. So good evening. This is Manoj Thomas at 6552 Carriageway, Corcoran. I have two separate topics I want to speak on, and I'll be brief. The first topic is actually an update. So representatives from Ravinia had a meeting with the church leaders earlier this month. I believe it was a very constructive meeting, and the church leaders listened to our concerns around size, traffic, and safety. We were able to discuss a few solutions, and the church told us that they will come back to us with solutions and updated plan that addresses some of these concerns. Additionally, the church understood the value in maybe engaging the residents early and have promised to come back to the community with town hall meetings that we will plan with them. We'll keep the council updated as we learn more. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank John from the council for his role in helping set up these meetings. I know he's not here, but he has been great. On the second topic, this is regarding an item from the last council meeting. There was a discussion about a state statute that speaks to the possibility of a moratorium for the city, a building moratorium for the city. Alan had requested the staff to look into this in more detail when it was brought up. I haven't seen an update on that in the agenda this week. I believe the moratorium is different to the topic of reviewing residential zoning that is on the agenda today. I would appreciate some clarity if that was taken up by staff per Alan's request. Thanks, I yield my time to listen to your response.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else, Jessica?
Mayor, at this time, no one else has raised their hand. Last call for open forum. If anyone is interested, please use the raise hand function if you're on a computer or a tablet. Otherwise, feel free to press *9. Mayor, at this time, no one else is raising their
Okay, then
hand to
we'll
be recognized.
move on to item 6, presentation recognitions. There are none. Item 7, which is a consent agenda. I'd like to pull item C just to discuss one of the points in there. Does anyone else wish to pull any items from the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull item D as well. And then, Mr. Mayor, with regards to open forum, do we mind letting Mr. Thomas know that we did have some internal discussions with our city attorney on that?
Yeah, I assume the staff would or already has gotten back to him on their attorney's response to that. If not, I'm sure they will. Yeah.
Okay.
I can follow up with Mr. Thomas. That was really a council directive that I followed up with the council, but I can follow up with Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, there's no reason not to let everyone know, I guess, what the result of it is.
Thank you.
It'll save confusion. It's a good point, Alan. Thank you. Anyone else wish to pull anything else from the agenda, from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, E, F, G, and H as presented.
So moved. Schultz.
Second, Lothar.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Mayor Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Item 7C, I asked to pull it just because one of the items on there, there's 2 items on there. One was the increase in the canopy size, and my understanding is the only reason they need a need a variance on that is because they're putting up a new canopy. They could increase the existing one, even though they're legal non-conforming, because they're not further encroaching on their non-conformity. And I'm okay with doing that because they're improving the canopy, making it look better because they're putting up a new one rather than just patching on they could just patch onto the existing one. So in this case, I'm okay with allowing that. The other item that comes up on this that seems a little bit strange, and we're having that twice tonight, is they're asking for a size variance on their sign because they have a sign that displays on both sides of the sign, and we double count that, which seems a little bit an error in our code. I think if you got a display that has the same thing on both sides of it, that should count as just one of the sides square footage, not both of them. And I guess I would ask staff to look at that in the code, and we can take a look at that in the future. It's not a problem now. I see Kendra has her hand up. What's your response? Or am I wrong on that, Kendra?
Yeah, I want to just make sure I understand you. So to be clear, if I have a freestanding sign, there's a sign on both sides of it, we only count that once.
Okay.
On the canopy, you've got a canopy and there's a sign on this end of the canopy and a sign on this end of the canopy, two completely different signs. We do count that twice.
Okay.
The request that we not count these two signs as two signs?
But yeah, I guess I want the code looked at, but in this case, it's my understanding is just the pricing on both ends of the canopy. So because there's a canopy in the middle, you say we double count it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just curious.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Can I weigh in on this a little bit? I would agree with you, Mayor, that if it's like the gas station sign with the price on both ends of the canopy, what's the difference between it being 6 inches apart or 16 feet apart? It's the same sign. So I would agree with you that should be looked at as, or viewed as one sign, not two separate signs when it comes to the square footage.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I'd
Phil.
agree to this. I'd agree this same point.
Yeah. And I think the operative is that they're doing it so that traffic from one direction sees the same thing as traffic from the other direction, and that's
Right.
the distinguishing
Right.
factor.
Right.
Tom, did you have something to say? Okay. Okay, those are the only points I had. I have nothing against the resolution, but is there any other discussion on that? Okay, I entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 7C as presented.
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Schultz.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson, Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
I want to make there's a little stupid comment, but I'm looking at my screen here and I've got Manoj Thomas and I've got Mayor Thomas. It almost confuses me to see the two juxtapositions on that, but it's a little curious. Nothing against you, Manoj. Item 7D, the sign raise for property located at 9350 County Road 19. You had something on that, Alan?
Well, I just wanted, and I would have raised the same question with C. It's just clarification from staff why both these appeared on the consent agenda versus separate items under planning. If you could just comment to that effect.
Mayor and Council, that's really my choice as far as viewing the agenda. These were pretty basic items to the Planning Commission that were non-controversial, and I didn't hear anything otherwise. So I just sometimes guess where things should belong as far as meeting length. So that's me. If you feel like more items should be on planning business rather than consent, I'm happy to hear that.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify for the city.
Yeah, I think the standard that I believe staff is using is if they think they're non-controversial and they pretty much fall within guidelines that staff feels they're qualified to deal with, they'll put them on the consent agenda. And the thinking is that as we get more and more things to deal with, it makes more and more sense to have things on the consent agenda. But obviously, any items that are on the consent agenda can be pulled, and/or you should contact staff if you feel they should be taken off of the consent agenda and put on the other items. I mean, that goes true for everything. So, but it's a good point, Alan. I think it's we need to be aware of what the standards are for where things go and how we deal with them. And that's
Sure.
in our purview.
Thank you.
Was there anything else on that item?
No, I'll make a motion to accept it.
Okay.
I'll second it, Lothar.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
Lothar.
Aye.
Okay. And
Sorry.
Schultz.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the planning business for items 8. Now this is time for public comment. The items that we're having is a bellwether easement vacation, consideration of an ordinance amendment to limit the building size in residential zoning districts, and then some discussion on building rates, some merging of building rates or consolidation of building rates. So at this time, if anyone would like to speak to these issues, with Jessica Nolan, she'll put you up.
Mayor, thank you. At this time, we did have an individual with their hand raised. It does look like they might have fallen off the call, so we'll see. Give them just a moment, but I do have another individual with their hand raised. Manoj Thomas, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you at this time. And then it does look like we have a few other people. So Manoj, feel free to go ahead.
Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I thought I heard the mayor say that this was about a building variance. I'm assuming I'm talking on the residential zoning ordinance review. This is that section, right? I want to make sure that I'm talking on the right agenda topic.
Yes. At this point, we are talking about any of the planning business,
Okay.
which would be 3 items.
Okay. Okay. I didn't hear him acknowledge that session, so I just call it out. Okay. So again, this is Manoj Thomas for the record, residing at 6552 Carriageway. So I read the staff report that was included in the packet regarding the residential ordinance review. It is informative to see many cities had specific requirements related to conditional uses. It does support the idea that additional scrutiny is needed to determine what makes most sense for Corcoran. I saw that there was potentially a public hearing planned for a review after a draft was created by staff. This is a great tool to gain insight from the community on what is a good fit for our city and obtain feedback on what could be appropriate protections from special uses and conditional uses. I do have one request. I request the council to consider an additional forum for residents across Corcoran to provide their inputs before the draft is created. I yield my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The next individual we have with a raised hand is Nav Navarian. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Nav.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. My name is Nav Narayan. Live in 6672 Carriageway in the Ravinia neighborhood. And I wish to speak about the zoning ordinance with regards to the commercial building. Thanks for your time. I reviewed the staff memo about the building sizes in the residential zone and wanted to point out that the list of cities that were analyzed contained a lot of places that are very, very different from Corcoran and even our surrounding communities. I had originally requested for the city to consider a size limit in low density residential zones during our last council meeting. The research in this report found that the cities analyzed didn't use this guideline. What I would like the council to consider that the cities that were considered were much bigger in population than Corcoran and a very much different character. I personally don't believe Maple Grove, Plymouth, Duluth, or Brooklyn Park are cities that we ought to emulate, because Corcoran is very different from the examples that you had, used in the agenda packet. we are more rural, and many people within Corcoran don't want to be developed in the same way that these larger communities are. So for a better comparison, I think we should look at the 3 other neighboring communities we have, like Medina, Wayzata, and Greenfield. These are all much more comparable to Corcoran. They have a rural feel, their size and locations are very close to Corcoran, and their design and development patterns also are similar. Another key observation is that they do not allow churches or schools in their low density residential areas at all, not even as conditional uses. This has allowed them to keep their rural feel even in their more developed areas. I think it would be prudent for this council to consider the motivation of these similar cities to have excluded these uses in residential zones. This consideration would be a good discussion at a public hearing reviewing a draft ordinance. I request the council to please consider having a city list revisited and ensure the opportunity of a public hearing to review this draft ordinance. Thank you. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you, Nev. Is anyone else, Jessica?
Yes, Mayor, we have 2 additional folks with their hand raised. Next, I'm gonna unmute Robert Dovenberg. Robert?
Oh, hi there. Thank you. Appreciate the time. My name is Robert Dovenberg, and if you want to enable the video, I have that as well, but it's totally up to you if you want to do that or not. I live at 335 Bergamot in Medina, so please don't hold that against me as I deliver my remarks here. So thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I live in the Wild Meadows neighborhood, and while a number of my neighbors are on this call, I've been selected to in essence represent us. Look, I think everybody knows what this discussion's about. I do want to call to the attention of the council that you know, many of us have homes that overlook at elevation the proposed development, and in my case, a 10-acre parking lot would be the dominant view from my front yard. You know, to a T, nobody I've spoken with has an issue with development at that location. I think everyone is just concerned about the size. So nobody's going to argue that it shouldn't be developed, but we do believe it should be developed as zoned. And look, you know, clearly there's considerable differences in the Corcoran zoning versus other cities. You know, the city of Plymouth has 12 different zoning designations, as the previous speaker said. The city of Medina doesn't allow schools, churches, etc. In the residential zoning at all. And look, it's not really surprising. I mean, Corcoran has until very recently been a, you know, has been a rural suburb. And I mean, I have to be brutally honest, until I moved here 3 years ago, when I thought of Corcoran, I thought of the stanchion. And I mean, no disrespect to the stanchion, I love it. I had my 40th birthday party there, but it's a very different, you know, it's a very different place today in that it's becoming much more urbanized as the city expands out. Look, I just want to say that I'm glad the council is looking at fixing this. In particular, I want to lend my voice to the size concept. I mean, I did some research today, and at least according to Wikipedia, you know, there are only 93 homes in the United States, 93 in the United States, larger than 40,000 square feet. None of them are in Minnesota, incidentally. So I just want to make the council aware of the idea that having such restrictions in a residential area is abundantly reasonable. Lastly, I just want to point out, I think Manoj already mentioned this, but there is a statute in the Minnesota code that allows the city to place a moratorium on any development in a residential area based on certain criteria in order to revisit its to visit its zoning regulations. And while I won't sit here and quote statutes, it's fairly easy to do this research. I just want to call attention to the fact that it is within the city council's ability to enact a moratorium for the purposes of doing more in-depth zoning and planning. So look, we think it's better for you, less risky to act now to use this tool, and I and my neighbors would like to encourage you to take that next step at this point. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Is anyone else, Jessica?
Yes, Mayor. Peter Hartz, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you at this time. Peter, you're on.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. I am Peter Hartz, and I live at 19169 Galloway Circle in Corcoran. I read the report in the packet for this week, and the first page of the report lists a lot of things that are allowed in residential zoning districts. But in low-density residential districts, only 3 of the 11 things on the list appear in the code as permitted or conditional uses in Corcoran. Those things are schools, places of worships, and parks. I have 2 questions related to this. My first question is the city staff proposing a review and revision of all residential zones, or is the staff only looking at low-density zones? And my second question is, while I know the agenda is focused on size controls, and those could still be valuable, I would like to request the council to remove all conditional uses from the low-density residential zones. This treats both churches and schools the same as other uses that are already excluded. For churches and schools that want to build in a residential zone, there could be a review to rezone that area to an institutional or some other type of zone instead. If this was done, it gives the city a stronger position. This way, Corcoran can decide whether it really makes sense to change the zoning for a particular parcel based on the needs of the city, the surrounding community, and the comprehensive plan. I look forward to hearing the responses to both these questions. Thank you very much for your time, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Pete. Anyone else, Jessica?
Mayor, at this time, there is not anyone else who's raised their hand. If you'd like, we could wait just a moment or we could continue.
Well, I think they've had sufficient time where everybody else has been talking, so if nobody's out there, we'll move on.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8A, which is a public hearing on the Bellwether easement vacation. I assume Kendra will lead us on that.
Yeah, Jess is going to pull up a quick slide for us. This is a fairly routine matter, but it does require a public hearing. It's an easement vacation for Bellwether 5th to vacate the easement over Outlot A, Bellwether 4th edition. When we plat outlots, we create a drainage and utility easement over the entire outlot. New easements will be provided with Bellwether 5th, which you approved earlier today, contingent upon vacation of this easement. Next slide. So Outlot A is the hash mark. Again, that is Bellwether 5th. And so this is simply vacating that drainage and utility easement and getting new easements as part of the plat. Next slide. We recommend that you hold the public hearing and then move to adopt Resolution 20-59 to approve that easement vacation.
Okay, thank you, Kendra. So procedurally, I guess we'll move right to the public hearing, and I'll declare the public hearing open. If anyone wishes to speak to the issue, Jessica, no one shall recognize you.
Mayor, at this time, if anyone's interested, they can go ahead and press *9 or use the raise hand function under participants. At this time, no one is currently raising their hand. I'll give it just a moment. Mayor, no one's raised their hand to speak. Last call, potentially.
Oh, nobody has?
No one has.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion, Lothar.
Second, Schultz.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, I guess Kendra has given us the background on it. Does anyone have any questions from Kendra on the factual questions on the resolution before us?
No.
I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2020-59 as presented.
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Schultz.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 8B, which is a consideration of an ordinance amendment to limit the building size in residential zoning districts.
And that'll be Kendra again. There are no slides, Jess, just you know.
Mr. Mayor, in your packet this evening was a brief memo. Staff was asked to prepare information for consideration of an ordinance amendment that would limit structure size in the residential zoning districts. Staff consulted with the city attorney in preparing the memo as well to provide the council with options and our best recommendation about how to proceed. It is very common to provide non-residential uses in residential districts historically and currently. Typically, we manage those types of uses through a combination of setback and height requirements or performance standards. It is unusual to manage the appearance and impact of buildings by building size, although as noted in the staff report, there are 3 different areas where Corcoran specifically does do that. Most cities generally will manage things by performance standards. The summary was certainly quickly done. Certainly there's, you know, a lot of cities in the state. We could look at a lot of them and different answers. This was a quick, based on nearby cities as well as cities that are similarly sized, which we believe places like Hugo, not Otsego or Rogers are similar positions to Corcoran. But as I said, there really aren't any that limit that. That's something that we could do, acknowledging that that would apply to all assembly uses. If you do that, you apply it across the board to those types of non-residential uses. And as always, these types of efforts are significant undertakings. We've already heard tonight, people would like us to look at more cities and look at more alternatives, and we're happy to do that as the council directs. But those do take time, and it does shift some priorities. So we've identified the current working list that staff has of ordinance amendments that have come from the council that you've asked us to look at. Including things that came out of the comprehensive plan and things that have come up tonight. We already added number 31 to that to look at the sign ordinance. It's really a matter of priorities for the council, where you want us to spend our time immediately. We do think that because of the coordination with the city attorney, this is not an insignificant amount of time needed to prepare an ordinance amendment to make it available for public comment, whether informally first before going to the formal public hearing. Typically on these, we do an informal review with the council to make sure we've captured the main concerns, and then hold the public hearings. Again, ordinances are most effective when the problem is well defined and we have clear direction from the council. So after looking at the priorities and in the ordinance updates, our recommendation is to add this to the priority list for 2021 later in the year, but we've provided some other options, including you could direct staff to add this to the ordinance updates for later this year or early 2021. You could direct staff to prepare an ordinance update to provide performance standards. Things like setbacks, landscaping, etc., what we see in some other cities. Or third option is to prepare an ordinance update to provide limits on building size in residential districts. And so depending on the direction this evening, we will continue to work with the city attorney. We will put together a schedule for those updates and bring something back to the council, like I say, at a work session before scheduling a public hearing. So that's my brief summary of the staff report, and certainly looking forward to feedback and direction from the council this evening.
I guess, you know, one of the items that strikes me on this issue is I think there were a couple of comments on that struck to it is we have low density residential in the Seward area, and we have low residential zoning in the rural area. And I look at things like a commercial feedlot. You know, that might be fine out in the country, but it's certainly not. It wouldn't work very well. Let's say that was happening on Hackamore and 101. So I think, I don't know who it was who brought it up. I think it was Gary who brought it up about changing how we approach this rather than trying to manage it by the sizes and setbacks and those sorts of things. It was kind of intriguing that maybe we should look at controlling it more through when they come in for these sorts of things, that they have to do a rezoning from low density residential to some other zoning district, which would give us a lot more latitude and discretion on the city's part. So big issue, needs a lot of looking at. And what it really drives home to me is it is a big issue, as you say, Kendra, and I think we need a work session. We need to get a lot more background on it because we are in a transition for the city, and the way we've been treating it in the past has worked pretty well. But we'd be hard pressed if somebody came in and wanted to put a commercial feedlot in our Seward area, and right now they'd have a right to do that, it looks like. So I'm not prepared to say we should go one route or another without having a lot more background, a lot more thought given to it. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know where everybody else is.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, when the ordinance was originally, written out, even though they've been updated through the years, I think the idea or concept of churches was obviously a certain size and scope. And I'm wondering if, obviously, Eagle Brook is a much larger facility with a much larger parking lot. And that's obviously what is the, I guess, bone of contention here. And so I'm wondering if the city maybe should be open to allowing more flexibility as to maybe where churches could go in terms of the type of zoning or areas of the city, particularly based on scope and size. And rather than just treat like one size doesn't fit all, in a sense, with churches, And so to have pretty much a zeroed in area where all churches need to go, maybe we need to really revisit that as well in a work session or some kind of dialogue going forward.
Yeah, I kind of think you're saying similar things, but maybe coming at two different directions. But I was kind of thinking of looking not in terms of the size of the building, but the size of the impervious surface that's around the building,
Right.
and limiting that. If we had per se, a size limit on that in a residential area, that ineffectively sizes down the size of the building that's going to be there as well, right? So to have 800 and something car spaces, you're going to have 100,000 square feet or something to that effect of blacktop. And nobody's going to want to look at that. And we can do stormwater and all that, but you can still have a church in a residential area if you say your parking lot sizes can only be, let's say, 40,000 square feet, which at a roughly 140 square feet for a car, you're talking what, 350 cars maybe? It's much smaller, but you still accomplish allowing that in those zones as well. There's different ways of looking at this, and setting up, worship or school zones is another way, but that's kind of a restrictive thing. But to the mayor's point, you could always rezone if something comes in to that effect. But I think people want to find some comfort level that we're not going to rezone something in the future. If somebody comes in and they want to put a church in a residential area, and we have zoning specifically for worship or schools somewhere else, people want to have some comfort level that we're not just going to rezone residential back to a worship zone and then put a large facility in, or a school in, or some other facility that is going to stand out in that community. So whatever we come up, I think it has to be defensible, and it has to be strong enough that it stands the test of time over multiple councils.
And
I
I
agree
don't
with that,
know.
Ellen. I think excuse me, Brian, just
No,
one
go ahead.
second. I think the rezoning issue is true in any case for any instance. So it's I don't know how you assure people of that, because we could rezone residential to commercial or anything we wanted to, but like,
Right.
anyway. Brian, you had something?
Yes, and I'm not sure about the legality of all of this kind of stuff when it comes to writing ordinances. But I wonder if a sequence is something that should be considered as well. So for example, if the church would have been here first before the residential development, then the people who chose to buy there would know that that's already there. But obviously this is in reverse order. So the residents are there first, and this, the church wants to come in, and it's probably not what the neighborhood was signing up for. So I'm wondering if sequence could be a part of the process. Again, I don't know. People that are more legally astute than I would probably need to weigh in on that. But if there's a 100-acre parcel that's guided a certain way, and the church goes in there first, well then if residents move into that area, they already know that the church is already there. But to put that on them after they've built their houses seems like, I think that's what's creating the issue here. So.
Well, clearly that's true, but the problem is we have to deal with, right now we have conditional uses in residential area that includes a broad spectrum of items. And
right.
I'm not comfortable saying the size is going to be the answer to that. I think we're targeting a solution to one problem. There may be a more broad solution to this, which I've heard a couple from citizens tonight. I think it was Pete Hartz who said, take everything off of there and then bring them back in through zoning controls. But the point for me is this needs a work session in order to really get our feet on the ground for a starting point even. So, Tom, did you have something?
Agree.
Tom, did you have something?
I would agree that is the big issue, and it's hard to see into the future how this will all work out. I'm really happy that the residents living nearby and that the folks from Eagle Brook are getting together. I think that to approach it in a cooperative way through some negotiation of the folks who are actually living there is really a positive step. And to try and sort of legalize this whole business gets to be, I think, really difficult. So I really want to applaud the residents of the community and the folks from Eagle Brook for being willing to sit down and have some face-to-face discussions to talk about what's going to work. I think that will always serve us better than to try and build a set of ordinances and rules which will account for every situation.
Yeah, and to your both Tom and the mayor's point, we can't come up with an ordinance for every situation. We found that out with the development rights ordinance. We'll never think of every situation. There's something that'll always come in. And I think this undertaking is way larger than anything we'll decide tonight, as the mayor alluded. And I would definitely want Councilmember Bottoма here for those discussions as well. But so I don't want to close the door on anything tonight. I think we need to move forward with some more discussion and some more data from staff on what our possibilities are.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd like to see us do a work session on it, and I'd like to take both the approach of limiting, allowing things as conditional uses in the residential area, and then limiting them by setbacks and that sort of thing, and then also the approach of the other approach of just taking them out of the residential areas and figuring another way to bring them in specific cases where they're appropriate. And the big issue for me is again, we're a city that's in transition right now, and we're going from where we're worried about riding stables and feedlots to houses of worship in a high density residential area. And this is, I'm not sure our existing approach to it works for that, but I need I need a work session where we're really getting a lot of different ideas out. We're spitballing ideas and looking at totally different approaches rather than trying to modify an approach we have and try and make something work. So that's where I'm at. So
I'm all in for a work session. I could use it.
okay.
Mayor and council, I could certainly poll the council and see, actually, after I work with Kendra to see what sort of time effort it takes, I could see what options do exist for a work session. I will say, since it was a topic of consideration and it was brought up again tonight, the city did receive an opinion from the city attorney regarding the moratorium that was presented to us that left out a significant portion of that statute. And the statute is 462.355 subdivision 4D, and it talks about no interim ordinance may halt, delay, or impede a subdivision that has been given preliminary approval. This is the point that matters. Nor may any interim ordinance extend time deadline for agency action set forth in section 15.99 with respect to any application filed prior to the effective date of the interim ordinance. So there is no ability to establish an interim ordinance or a moratorium right now to stop this project. It's the forward-looking discussion.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I'm going to take my attorney's staff attorney's advice not to on what we can and can't do, and in spite of what some citizens might feel and think that we have a right to do. So our staff attorney has told us we shouldn't do it, and I'm not going to propose that we do it. So okay, with that, I guess we have a consensus that Brad will poll everybody and put together a work session to discuss the issue of how we deal with conditional uses or various uses in, I would say in the broad sense of all zoning districts in the city and how we approach that. So if that meets with everyone's approval, that's what we'll do. Okay, thank you, Kendra, and thank you, staff. So now we'll move on to the new item 8C, which is the building rights consolidation subject. So Brian, you had wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I was just, I actually wasn't on the council when this was, when this decision was made, but I actually watched the meeting. And again, and I understand what Councilman Schultz is saying, that, oh, you can't make an ordinance that just covers every jot and tittle that could possibly happen in the future. But I'm just wondering, with the uniqueness of the geographical layout of Corcoran, and if that contributed to some degree to the issue with the Kermie, expansion or development there with the extra houses. I'm just wondering if there is anything that we could do in terms of looking at reviewing land development rights, and maybe this previous item is going to take the whole work session, but possibly if there was 10 or 15 minutes left over, we could at least revisit this a little bit, because I think there was a sentiment after that council meeting that maybe there should be a review of the land development rights. And so I just thought maybe there should be a target date for that. I don't know that that needs to be the top list on our priorities right now, but it maybe should be sometime in the future, put on a target date that we might revisit that. That was all I was really referring to.
Yeah, and as I stated when that application came before us, I don't feel a sense of a need to deal with that. If the rest of the council does, we certainly can. And my point is that I think the way we're doing it right now does accomplish the big picture of what we want to have happen, which is to consolidate development and create as much open space as we can on a permanent, semi-permanent basis.
Sure.
And while we'll have individual cases that people take advantage of it, where they have swampland or whatever else,
yeah.
Maybe there's some tweaking we can do. And if someone wants to look at the ordinance and see if they can see where the hole is that we could plug real easily, I'd be open to that. But to do a major effort now, especially with all this, the issues that we have in front of us and staff's
Yeah.
time availability, I don't favor directing staff to spend a lot of time on it. And again, if
Yeah.
the rest of the council does speak up, and we'll do it.
No, and I hear what you're saying. I really do. I think more from my perspective, I felt bad for the neighbors that they were kind of left with no real options available to them. And
Sure.
so that was more my thinking is, should this be revisited at some point in time? Not necessarily that it needs to be a priority right now.
Yeah. And I'd be glad to sit down with you, Brian, if you want to talk about it and get a little more perspective on it.
Yeah.
Obviously, it can only be you and I, no other council members, but
that'd be fine.
But
Right.
if any other council members feel different about that, this is the time to speak up.
Well, I also felt, Mr. Mayor, that there was something that wasn't quite right about the order of events there, where the land was developed, it was divided, and then building rates were shifted around, kind of redeveloping that 1 10-acre parcel. And that just didn't seem quite square to me. So I would think that it would be not the highest priority for sure, but somewhere on the list that we try not to walk into that particular circumstance again, if we can do it without kind of throwing everything out and starting over.
Yeah, the development rights is a tricky issue, as I've found out from being and not even owning land to have development rights on. But people take value in their development rights, and as one person pointed out in there, well, maybe you could look at development rights on only buildable acres, but in doing so, there's so much wetland within the city that takes value away from people and what their building rights are. The only thing that's come to mind to me is that when you have someone split some property with the use of development rights, that land, maybe you could put a time frame on when the next split would be, so that land couldn't be bought on speculation for further splitting like it was done in this case. That's the only thing that comes to mind for me. I don't know if that's doable. I don't know if we can legally do it, but it may be something we want to look into. It would have definitely did something in this case, because that lot would have probably not have been purchased on speculation, because if it would have had to been held for 5 years or 10 years before it could be further split.
You mean by split? You mean by consolidated and share the development rights?
Yeah, it was consolidated, and then it was, and basically that parcel was brought into the other 40 acres and then resplit. But I mean, that's just paper, right?
Yeah. Well, I think if anybody has any specific targeted changes to the ordinance that they'd want to discuss with staff, they can do that and come back at a future time. But I don't favor addressing it in general. So it's just a big issue. We've been through it. I think it's working pretty well. There will always be side cases that don't work out perfectly, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so if there's no further issues or desire for discussion, we'll move on to unfinished business, item 9A. At this time, we'll take public comment. 9A is due diligence commencement notice for the well treatment site. So if anyone who wishes to speak to that issue, Jessica could recognize you and she'll put you on.
Thanks, Mayor. If you are interested in speaking, you can press *9 if you're on the phone. Otherwise, use the raise hand function under the participants tab on your computer, or feel free to use the 3-dot button if you are on a tablet or other smart device. Mayor, at this time, we don't have anyone raising their hand. If you'd like, we could wait just a moment.
We'll give them a minute. I don't foresee a big outcry on this, but we'll wait.
No one has raised their hand at this
Okay,
time.
we'll move on to item 9A now, which is the due diligence commencement notice for the well treatment site. Is this Brad or Kevin or whom?
This will be Kevin.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. If you recall, back in February of this year, Council approved moving forward with a purchase agreement for a property for the purposes of a municipal well and water treatment facility. Since that time, we've worked with the landowner on conducting a test well that focused on water quality sampling and pump test results for capacity and flows. There's an engineer memorandum provided in the information and in the council agenda that summarizes that all the data we have received to date has come back satisfactory, and it is a high quality source of water. So and there's nothing that we detected that was not commonly used or was not unexpected, so that we could commonly treat that with our water treatment system. So our purchase agreement basically requires us to notify the landowner by July 31st if we would like to move forward with the due diligence or continue moving forward with the due diligence process. So that's what we have for you here tonight. We are looking for you to authorize staff to issue the buyer's due diligence commencement notice to proceed to an evaluation of the title of the property and conduct its due diligence evaluation. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, I have no questions on that myself. I don't even know what it means, but anybody else?
This is.
I mean, I've read the packet and I see what we're doing here, but the process, it's kind of foreign to me. So
yeah, it's technical terminology for the purchase agreement.
Just the observation that
you should be one of these people, John.
The observation that we have a relatively high concentration of iron and manganese in that water. That sounds like the water at my house, and it is a nuisance, at least. So that, Kevin, as we move forward with this, if we could stay abreast of possible technology to remove some of that iron and manganese at the well or shortly thereafter before it gets pumped out to individual homeowners, it would serve us in the long run very, very well. We would reduce the amount of salt that we pour into the environment. We could just make owning a home in Corcoran just a lot more satisfactory. So otherwise, everything looks fine to me.
Sure, I can just touch on.
Agree,
yeah,
Tom.
Yeah. I can just touch on that, and that's very normal for this aquifer.
Yep.
And that this information will be utilized in the feasibility study that's underway on the water treatment site. So we take this sampling information and prepare basically the design option. So there'll be more opportunities to get specific on what we're treating and how we're treating it to come.
Thank you, Kevin. That's wonderful.
Anything else?
I had no questions.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to authorize staff to issue the buyer's due diligence commencement notice to proceed to an evaluation of the title of the property and conduct its due diligence evaluation.
So moved, Schultz.
Second, Anderson.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Lothar.
I believe I have to recuse myself from this one.
Okay. And Schultz.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we're moving on to new business, which will consist of the draft 2021 budget and authorization to seek donations for the City Park project. At this time, we'll take public comment for anyone who wishes to speak to these issues.
Anyone's interested in speaking, again, you can press that *9 on a phone. Otherwise, use the raise hand function under participants. At this time, Mayor, I'm not seeing anyone who's raising their hand, but if you'd like, we could give them just another moment. anyone's interested in doing a public comment, this is, I believe, the last public comment portion for the evening. So feel free to raise your hand on with the raise your hand function under the participants tab, or press *9. Mayor, at this point, we do not have anyone who's raised their hand.
So we'll move on to item 10A, which is the draft 2021 budget. I assume, Brad, you'll address that.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, and there's a couple slides that Jess will pull up here too. And of course, the leadership team is here to answer any questions as well. But it's that time of year when we start the 2021 budget process. Typically, we bring you a first draft here in July with a second draft sometime in August. And then ultimately, we approve the preliminary levy in September. Right now, we're tentatively planning for that for September 10th. At that time, the notices go out to the community on the preliminary levy. There we are. And then we adopt the final levy in December. So as far as when we're drafting the budget, really the two main goals we're looking at from the council is one, to meet the needs of a growing community. And the second, of course, is from the council to maintain or decrease the tax rate. Currently, we're just over 45%, and I include just some history there of the tax rate where it's been. Last 4 years, we've been trending down just slightly with that, which I think is good, especially with all the growth we've been having and needs in the community on top of that. Next slide, Jess. So I won't go over through everything. The line item budget is in the packet. I just wanted to highlight a couple things that are changes from the 2020 budget through the 2021. And the first is some items that are really just requirements. We have a debt service increase from the 2020-2021 capital improvement plan. We have a capital improvement plan, or sorry, yes, the capital improvement plan increase. So this is in plan where we're trying to cash out our fleet and larger infrastructure instead of issuing debt. And per our plan, we're increasing that year over year and showing a $50,000 increase this year. In past years, it's only been a $25,000 increase, but with the growth taking place, we need to escalate this a little further. Fire increase, we're assuming a 7% increase. Now, just today, Matt and I got the 2021 budget from Loretto Fire, which is the biggest portion of our fire budget, and it's about a 3% increase. So there's potential that that could be lower. We have the new assessing contract that we approved about a month ago. The full year of the city planner, we budgeted for the city planner to begin actually July 1st of this year. We pushed it back, just not knowing with the pandemic. Actually, my hope was to post that tomorrow and get that hiring process moving forward. But then it's the full year for the budget for 2021. With the existing full-time equivalent staff, with a 2.75% increase for staff, which is planned, that follows the union agreement with the police department. That's about $100,000. We're also assuming a 10% increase in health insurance. We typically have a 70-30 employer-employee split for that increase. Now, I don't know at all what health insurance is going to do following a pandemic, so we'll see what happens later on this year with that. And then we have some increases for information technology. Just every quarter we do external and internal threat assessments, and our budget we drafted for the 2020 budget, we used 2019 data, and we've had to upgrade several things and enhance some software here and there. So we're finding that our IT budget needs a little more to get us where we need to be. Obviously very important for our city. And we also have 5,000 in there for body camera web technology needs, as well as some additional computers needed for the staff that we're proposing on hiring too. Next slide. Some of the additional items, just a note from staffing perspective here, we do include a first ever sergeant position in this budget. This would provide nighttime supervision coverage. So right now, Matt and Ryan as well, basically on call 24/7. Anything comes up where a police officer is unable to really decide or need some direction on what to do next step, it's a call to Matt or Ryan at nighttime. And it's incredibly burdensome, as you might imagine, for not only their lives, but their families' lives as well. And we're beyond the ability, have been for a couple of years actually, for Matt and Ryan to handle that. So ultimately we need 2 sergeant positions to manage the overall nighttime coverage, but this would be the first, and ideally we'd have the second sergeant in the 2022 budget. We also have an initiative here to put $10,000 in the budget for fire service inspections. And this came out of the fire study that the council has reviewed earlier on, just trying to work with our business community and working on not an enforcement initiative, but an education initiative for our fire chiefs from the communities to go to businesses, check their sites, see if things are where they need to be, and then eventually it could lead to an enforcement initiative, but really it's education at this point. And if there are questions on that, you can certainly ask Matt. We have a part-time police technician. Right now it's 25 hours per week. We're proposing a really minor tweak to 29 hours per week. And then the part-time community service officer. So in the 2020 budget, it's 20 hours a week beginning October 1st to the end of the year. We're proposing moving that to 30 hours per week for 2021. But then, of course, it's a whole year. So 9 months more plus 10 more hours per week. So it's a significant increase with that item there. Ultimately, that would help our police officers do cop work if there's items that are helping people with either an animal issue, lock car doors, those type of softer things. These CSOs could do those work and keep our cops doing the work they need to be. So those are some of the highlights there. Next slide. Jess, as far as what we're doing with the 21 budget, again, this is just a starting point. We have the two goals ahead of us. One, are we meeting the staffing level or the needs of the community? I would say yes, hesitantly. I know our leadership team is struggling to manage anything right now with the growth taking place. So we have some significant staffing assistance here, but it'll be helpful. So hesitantly, yes, this budget will meet the growing needs of the community. We're not there yet as far as the tax rate. So we need to cut about $126,000 or find revenue or a mixture of. And right now, essentially, we're not looking for council to help us find 1,000 here, 1,000 there. That's for staff to do. But if you have any overarching feedback right now, whether we're on the right path, not on the right path, that would be good to hear as we keep working on this and bring it back to you in a couple meetings. So with that, myself and the staff are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I can start out just a little bit. You know, Brad and I discuss staffing needs and that sort of thing on a regular basis. So I'm in full support. I don't have any questions tonight regarding that and the other items. And a little background for people as far as why are we trying to keep the tax rate the same. My philosophy, and I think most of the council's philosophy to date, has been that as we get development, we will increase our expenditures, but our goal is to not require an increase in tax from the existing citizens of Corcoran in order to fund the services that are brought into need because of the new development, and the tax rate is the best control doing that, and that's why I stick to the, I guess, the dogma, if you will, of maintaining or reducing the tax rate. It seems like it's a little bit of focusing on one number, but I think it's a pretty good spot to be. On the other hand, if there were clear needs to do it or benefits to increase it, I would do that, but it has to be very clear and precise in order to get me to do it. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I don't have any issues to discuss as far as specific items on the agenda. I think it's up to Brad to go through and find those additional funds, or to make his case for why he can't find them. And that's where I'm at. So anyone else, as we go through the council members, Anderson, what do you have for that? Any comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor, no, actually, Brad and I had a discussion because it's my first time through the budget, and he answered several of my questions really very well. I know that, like everybody else in Corcoran, well, almost everybody, the value of our homes is assessed higher, and so even when the rate doesn't go up, the taxes that we pay go up. So that seems like that should be enough. And I also know that in this time of heavy growth in Corcoran, just because of the way that property taxes work, folks who build houses, we don't start getting their money right away, and so it does put a crunch on the folks who live here to cover that period of time until the new homes become fully integrated into the tax structure. So I am greatly appreciative that it looks like the infrastructure needs, especially around the IT needs, is not being pushed off to a later date. It's just critically important that we keep all that stuff up to date. Otherwise, we pay a big price later on. And you know, every once in a while, you hear about a city who is essentially their IT system is hijacked, and it leads to just all sorts of trouble. And so, I greatly appreciate that we're doing as best we can to keep the city's IT system safe and functioning. And with increased use of cameras and all of that technology, that's going to only grow. But it's just part of living in this modern world. So we're close. I think that Brad and the staff can find the $126,000.
Thank you, Tom. Brian, do you have anything?
I did have a good conversation with Brad, and I appreciated him bringing me up to speed on some of this stuff. One of the things that I had been percolating on was with the additional, obviously, jump in new homes and building and so forth that is happening and will be happening with some of the new development taking place. Would it make sense and economic savings on our part to bring our inspections in-house rather than bringing it on a consulting basis? And so obviously the cities had this discussion on numerous times in the past, but I'm wondering if it doesn't need to be revisited because of all of the development that's happening at the present time. And that may be an area where there could be some savings to the city. The other item was obviously with interest rates being where they are today, I'm sure that if there was something that needed to be funded through a bond issue, the interest rates would be historically low, I guess is what I would say. And so I don't know what tomorrow may bring, but today's interest rates are really, really low. So if there was the need to do that on a bonding issue, I think that might be something to consider too, if there was the project that needed it. So, but as far as specific expenditures, I trust in the city staff and what they're doing, and I'm in agreement with you that hopefully Brad can find where to save that $127,000, and if not, we'll figure out how to generate the revenue somehow. So, so I can't wait till the Bellwether and the other Ravinia houses catch up, and we can start getting some of that revenue into the city's pockets. So,
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Ellen, do you have anything?
I think there's a lot of good discussion there. I think the goal of maintaining the current rate is a very good goal. People are going to be asking, in the future with all growth, at what point we're going to start seeing decreases, but I can live with the current rate as it is. I'd like to see that we make sure we have some investment in our public safety department, whether that be training or staffing. The last 3 months, both, regionally and nationally, have shown us that we need to make sure that we have a well-trained and staffed police department for public safety. So I would hope that we have some information on what additional staffing needs we have with that for more patrol officers on the street, and making sure they're properly trained, so we see our name in the paper in a good light.
Amen to that.
Could I just add also obviously what we've seen happening in the Minneapolis area at large, with a number of police officers resigning, obviously there's tremendous stress and pressure on them. It can feel as though it's a thankless job for many of them. And I would just want to make sure that we are doing all that we can do as a city to provide the emotional structure and strength and support for our police that this job can easily sap out of them. And I think as an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if we can have some foresight on even dealing with some of the emotional issues that go along with just that vocation, it would be really, I think, in the long run, a good benefit for the city.
Yeah.
I agree, Brian. I think staff knows that they have our full support on that issue, and as they should. And it's it is true. And I know that our police department is under a great deal of stress right now. Yeah. And for the citizens' benefit, if they can anytime they can reach out to the police department and let them know how much they appreciate them. It's really helpful to these folks to hear that and to see those demonstrations. So
Yeah.
okay, so I guess you just need that input from us, right, Brad? So we'll move on. And there are a lot of comments and a lot of conversations going on individually with staff and with Brad and with the council members. So a lot of things are being worked out. We don't hit every item here on at the council meeting as we shouldn't, unless there are issues that have to be addressed. So Brad has been doing these budgets for a while, and I think he's got it down pretty well and does a really good job. And I commend him and our staff and on how they put these numbers together, and they do a very good job of managing. I'm totally comfortable that we're in good hands on it. And when they spend money, they need it's a need, not a desire. And they really are looking for the best of the city for the growth that we're seeing, and it's a difficult task to manage. A lot of dynamics going on. So so good job and thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just for the council, I have my leadership team obviously pulls this budget together, so they do it. I get to check it. And the one thing I'd like to highlight is the lack of infighting that we have as a group. The conversations are really inspiring as far as someone saying, no, you need that. What can I cut? Well, I can defer that to next year because you really need that. And it's a great group effort behind the scenes. So I'm proud of the group here.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, team. Okay. So item 11 has been pulled, so we won't have that closed session. And item 12 is the staff reports, active Corcoran planning applications. We all have the
Mr. Mayor, 10B.
10B. Yep, you're right. Sorry. Sometimes they need to be checked in. I get in a hurry here.
We're watching you.
Okay.
We have
It's
your
good.
back.
It's good that somebody is because it's really needed. Okay,
We have
item
your
10B, which is authorization to seek donations for the City Park project.
Mayor and Council, real quick here. Over the past couple of years, the Parks and Trails Commission has worked with staff to develop a master plan, a draft master plan for City Park. And we've developed a couple of phases essentially with a pretty significant phase one estimated about 1.5 million. It's pretty significant because the first phase has to have all the infrastructure. So it's parking, water, sewer, those types of things. And all we're asking for tonight is authorization for staff to begin the process of seeking donations. There's obviously a couple big groups in town that have some funds, but we're probably going to be asking for something pretty significant. So if we can talk to them early, get it on the radar, perhaps get them to earmark some funds for us. Gambling funds are not great these days. But we need to talk to them. And ideally we have donations that we can also then combine with city money that we can then seek grant funds. We can show that there's support of the community. Hennepin County, the Twins grant essentially has an annual up to $300,000 grant application. And I think if we were to show we had donations, city funds, we could certainly have a really, really big shot at something to help us. We're looking for this, possibly a 2022 project. So long-term ahead, but this goes back to what the council has talked about. What are the existing residents getting from the development? Well, we have these park dedication funds that come in, and this would help fund a very significant project, the City Park. It's a pretty substantial plan from upgrading the ice rinks to a splash pad to pickleball courts to an updated playground and much, much more over many phases. So just looking for authorization for us to go out and do some work and get some funds to support the project.
Okay, any questions, Council? Okay,
How much of your target is like local businesses and stuff? Is that like a target for you, Brad?
Mayor and Council, I would say no. The biggest targets would be starting with the JCs, the Lions, the Maple Grove Lions. I mean, this is a regionally used field. If you look at the data that Jess CB has for who comes and does sports in Corcoran, there's a lot of Maple Grove folks too. So I think it'd be those large organizations. And if there was a gap, I could see, hey, there's a gap community. We're pretty close. one of those temperature gauge type things. I don't know.
Right.
And see if we can fill it up. But I think first and foremost, there's organizations that have funds to help build community and do fun projects, and I'd start there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to authorize staff to seek donations for the city park project.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Walter.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Lothar,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brad. Now we can move on to item 12A, which is the planning applications. And I think we have all that from a memo from Kendra. Unless there's any comments or questions on it, we'll just accept that as presented. There's no action to be taken. And item 12B, the pandemic response update. Is Matt going to give us an update on that?
Yes, thanks, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
A little louder.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
All right.
There you
Hold
go.
on. Is that better?
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, for your kind words and support for the work we're doing in the police department during the budget portion of tonight's agenda. It means a lot to our staff. As far as COVID-19, we're at nearly 50,000 cases statewide with over 15,000 in Hennepin County, and we're continuing to increase in cases towards the second peak. As most of you know, the governor's implemented a statewide mask mandate in Executive Order 20-81, which is beginning Saturday. We're working on updating our city plans accordingly, and as we look at it from the law enforcement side, really the follow through is going to be looked at as an educational approach still. Enforcement's really only a last resort, and if that's putting other people at risk in certain scenarios. So our EOC continues to organize our COVID response and organizing finances related to CARES Act or FEMA reimbursement eligibility. The police department staffing in neighboring communities are starting to be impacted by employees that have contracted COVID. And as a region, we're again closing in on moving towards a regional staffing model for coverage. You'll remember we talked about that a couple of months ago, and we stabilized for a little while, but we're rapidly approaching that again. Our city hall is working on refining the reopening plan and seeing what that looks like. And from emergency management and staff health perspective, cities are taking a very wide variety of approaches. Some cities have remained open throughout, other ones have only closed the public a very short time, and other cities have their city facilities fully closed to the public and don't have any intentions of opening them until the pandemic begins to subside, or at least starts tracking in a better direction. And from a staff level, we know one size doesn't fit all, and we've been very thoughtful discussing really the philosophy behind that as it relates to providing the highest level of service to the community while still considering staff and public safety. As you know, we don't have a lot of depth at any one staff position in the city, but I think we'll be able to arrive at the appropriate blend for our community. So with that, I'll kind of hand it off to Brad and Jess for further comments.
Sure, Mayor and Council, and just to add on the last part there, with Matt, we talked an awful lot internally, and I'll go over high view here, and if there's details, Jessica's available. But regarding City Hall opening, we've been closed since, I believe, March 18th. We're still closed at this point. In our preparedness plan we adopted a couple meetings ago, we're in phase 3. We envisioned at least some scheduled opening beginning phase 4 that actually we thought was going to take place around the 4th of July. Right now we're still hunkering in that phase 3, and with the cases going up, as Matt talked about, we don't picture that really moving. That being said, there is an election coming up when we have to allow in-person voting, and that has to start, I believe, August 4th.
Yes, August 4th would be the first day of in-person absentee voting here at City Hall.
So with that, Jessica has recommended we open City Hall beginning actually Monday, August 3rd. Really the Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 for that week, as well as the following week. The primary is actually on August 11th, which is a Tuesday. With candidate filing, you actually can have a couple days where you can rescind your filing notice, and just to kind of round out the week. So having 2 weeks of full opening, again, the week of August 3rd and the week of August 10th. And right now we're thinking we would go to a 9 to 1 Monday through Friday, 4 hours a day opening. And again, as Matt talked about, after that point, I should say. And this is a plan. It will change. We'll keep updating you at the next council meeting, which would be August 13th when we're open at that point. And it's really, as Matt said, we have a thin staff. There's one of us to doing all these things. And if a couple go down, we're already treading water at this point. So we're being very, very careful of having staff in place. And Jessica's been thoughtful. One of the reasons, okay, why 9 to 1? Well, one, over the lunch hour is kind of nice to have that time, but it also allows a gap of time where after 1 o'clock, when one staff goes home, another staff can potentially come in and work a 1:30 to whatever here at City Hall and not have that kind of overlapping people in the same area. So we're trying to be as thoughtful as we can. There's no perfect response to all of this, but I just wanted to at least go through that. And again, Jessica can work through the details on that. As far as council meetings, we're not requesting any changes at this point. We're recommending staying virtual for the time being. And the real reason for that is we can do it all virtually. We can do it all in person. We do not have the capacity to do a hybrid model of some here and then piping in some and having a screen. Now, I had a kickoff meeting this week with our RT provider, and we have a meeting scheduled for August 10th to kick off a formal city council chambers enhancement project that would be a use of the CARES funding. We then hopefully can have a model where we can have both some in person and the public also joining virtually too. But I think if we're by the second meeting in September, would be lucky if we got to that point. So as much as we'd like to have more in person, until we can do it well and offer people who are quarantining at home and can't come to City Hall, we're kind of stuck with this virtual model at this point. So I just wanted to, as much as we're opening up City Hall or trending that way, it right now won't change as far as the council meetings. The last thing I have is I have 2 more COVID approvals. The council approved me to have some extra powers to approve items that make the most sense. I did authorize Three Rivers Park District to place signs on property out around the community. They're trying to get feedback for the Diamond Lake Regional Trail Corridor, which is really hard to do during a pandemic. So they own, actually Hennepin County owns the property at the trailhead off 19 and 10, so they're allowed to put signs there, but they don't own the other property. So what I authorized them to do is put signs seeking feedback along the trail, the Crowessen Trail there, and then also at City Park, Wildflower Park, as well as City Hall. So that's one approval I did give, and obviously I need to inform the council of that. And then I'm working on another one right now, so just a heads up on that. St. John's School, Church and School, they're trying to prepare for the fall season, and in order to make more spacing happen, they have to take things out of the classroom. So they've requested a 40-foot trailer to be placed on the outside of their building, essentially rent a trailer. They can put things in there to allow for more spacing. And we're working out where that should be, making sure their surrounding neighbors can't see it. But that's another potential approval I'm looking for. That would have to be through the entire school year, and my zoning authority only ends along coinciding with the governor's authorities. So at some point, likely, we'd have to have a resolution so that could continue. But those are the updates I have, and we're all happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a question, Brad. What needs are driving opening up City Hall, for 4 hours at a day, during the day? Yeah. Are there specific needs that are driving that?
I'll let Jessica answer that.
Okay.
Brian, thank you for asking that question. The election is the main driver for this first portion of opening up. We will be in candidate filing starting July 28th, which can be done virtually, and then we'll be absentee balloting, and then that withdrawal period that Brad touched on for that first full week. But in terms of opening, we certainly, the reason we're looking at partial reopening with updating you as things might change. So we might feel recommend that we do something less than that. Initially, we wanted to really be available to have a little bit more face-to-face with folks, but things seem to be working generally pretty well. But certainly, I think we're going to take our time and make sure that we're being thoughtful about this. So we'll have a better update on what those hours, those 4 hours might look like closer to our next meeting on August 13th. But we really do want to be thoughtful about that and kind of take it meeting per meeting.
Yeah, it just kind of feels like since the governor's announcement yesterday, it just kind of feels like as a state we've taken a couple steps backwards, you know, and so obviously there's a lot of impact on a lot of, you know, worship communities, et cetera, and so forth, but we have to, as a state, we have to have an end game here, and the end game is to lose as few people as possible. And I think the staff and all of you are doing a terrific job. And I don't feel like the city's like just limping along. I think we haven't missed a beat on so many things. And I would be, I guess, cautious to opening up too quickly for feeling, I don't know, whatever pressure you might feel to do that or whatever. I mean, if it's a need-driven thing, obviously that's one thing. But if it's pressure from whatever, let's not bow to that, you know. So you guys need to take care of yourself because you're not replaceable. So
Thanks, Brian, for that feedback. We'll certainly take that into consideration.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, the 2020 council schedule.
Mayor and Council, no planning business the next agenda, obviously, but a lot of business just being taken care of. Potential recognition, a noise waiver, the body camera policy and public hearing is tentatively on that schedule. A code enforcement update, and then a few other things, obviously. So just let me know if you have any questions. You do have bonus week next week, one of the 4 weeks when you don't either have a meeting or have to read a couple hundred pages of packet. So enjoy one of your 4 weeks of the year when that takes place.
I'll go out of town. Okay. Any other business? Anything from council?
No.
not for me.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Schultz.
Second, Lothar.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Lothar,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, council and staff, for a good meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Yes. Stay well and safe. Bye-bye.
Bye now.